All right, welcome to the Game Inform Show, everybody. This is a complicated web, but all right, top left, we have Rami Ismail. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hi there. Glad to be here. Excited to talk about this video game.
Yeah, I'm very curious to hear everybody's take on it. Rami, you might know from Ridiculous Fishing, Nuclear Throne. What do you think you're best known for, Rami?
Probably for Nuclear Throne, honestly. I'm a game developer at Vlambeer, one half of the studio were the creators of Super Crate Box, Luftrausers, Ridiculous Fishing, and Nuclear Throne most recently. I travel the world meeting game developers talking video games.
That sounds beautiful. All right, upper right, we have Alex Hutchinson from Typhoon Studios. Welcome, sir.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing really good. Back to the show. You're on before. We talked about your work on Assassin's Creed 3, Far Cry 4. You're here as the open world expert. I hope you're okay with that.
I didn't know. We should have briefed each other before the show, but that sounds great.
Everybody secretly got their specialty. All right, Ryan Payton, lower left. Welcome, sir, from Camouflage.
Thanks for having me.
Let's see. You're here because you're very likable, and also you worked on Metal Gear Solid 4, and so when it comes to like the art of perfection, we need you to join this conversation.
Yeah, because I made that whole video game by myself.
Yeah, that's how the rumor goes. I do believe. Lower right, Jake Casdell. Welcome, sir, from 17-Bit.
Howdy. Good morning.
Yeah, good to have you, man.
Good morning, Japan.
Yeah, congratulations on Galaxy coming to Switch and everything, man. Very exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, we got more coming soon, so look for some announcements in
All
very
right.
short order.
Very interesting. Okay. Red Dead Redemption 2, you guys. I feel like we've talked about it a lot on this podcast. The industry's talked about it. But it's always just from some dumb journalist perspective of, hey, that horse looks cute. What are you going to do about that? I want to know, like, specifically what you guys see that the rest of the world doesn't see. But maybe to kick things off, how's everybody's read on the game overall? Is everybody wowed by it, disappointed by it? Just you want to jump in with your take? Maybe Rami, you go first.
I'm a little bit of all of the above, I think. It's both extremely impressive and oddly disappointing and not what I expected and kind of great. And it's a beautiful mess in all the best and worst ways at the same time. It's a fascinating game for the fact that it exists. And so much of it feels like they had a very specific vision going into this and just nobody to tell them whether something was a good or bad idea, and they just did all of it.
Is that
and
just...
It's mesmerizing. I'm not sure it's good, but it's mesmerizing.
Yeah. Is that just the power of the Housers at this point? I mean, they have all the money in the world. No one can tell them no, and so it's like, let's just keep going. Keep plowing down this road.
I think there's a lot of truth in what Rami said, but I think that's also the best part. It's clearly a vision from people who had an idea of what they wanted, and it's what they wanted until it was finished. And so there's part of me, that is very jealous of the opportunity where the budget and the team size and the sheer sort of power behind that machine that gets it done. And therefore I kind of love it. I mean, Red Dead 1 was my favorite. I think it's probably right up there in my favorite games of all time. I think it's magnificent for many reasons. I'm only about halfway through 2, so I can't even do spoilers on this one. But it's for some reason it's not gelling with me as much. I don't know whether that's that it's something, a place I've been before, or other reasons, but I think it's an incredibly impressive achievement.
Yeah, Ryan, where are you at with this thing?
I'm in a weird place with it because I'm not like the biggest fan of Rockstar's games. They just don't seem to like kind of just connect with me, especially on the GTA side of things. I look at them as an incredible achievement. I play those games because it's just, I can't believe you're doing this on a 360, like what they did with GTA 5. It's like from a technical perspective and scope perspective, it's incredible. But like the humor and like the kind of antisocial nature of it has never really gelled with me. And that's kind of why I respect Red Dead Redemption, the first one, but it still had that kind of like signature, like in quotation marks, like mature humor that is like over the top and like it's more antisocial than it is kind of like thoughtful humor, in my opinion, and almost like slapstick in a lot of ways. And so I kind of went into this game like kind of worried because I love the Wild West, right? I love the cowboy fantasy. And so playing this game, especially with the first act, I know we're going to try to avoid spoilers, but the first chapter, from the first minute, I'm like, okay, I'm in. Things are looking really good. This is the type of like kind of mature Deadwood, like not too tongue-in-cheek Rockstar approach. This feels like almost like different guys are behind this game in a lot of ways. I really feel like they've really grown up. And
you should wait for you getting drunk with Lenny sequence, because then.
No, here's the thing. Like I've actually played that. I think it's called like A Quiet Time. That chapter.
Yeah.
I loved it. It's like, it's. I don't know. Maybe I'm not explaining it the right way, but I felt like the Undertaker character from the first Red Dead was like really over the top, and like he's like totally on drugs, guys, and he's like wild and crazy, you know. But this one, like they're even like their funny moments, I felt like are they're more Westworld than they are like the Three Amigos, if you know what I mean. And that really speaks to me. I like dark, depressing, serious stuff, right? And so this game, I'm in. It's like the first like Rockstar game in a long time that I'm really, really into it.
Yeah, Jake, what about you? Just to round this off.
I'm pretty blown away by it. I think to what you guys said, I think it's exactly the game they wanted to make, for better, for worse. I think, just to start with the few things that really bother me, I do think that they had a real sort of vision in mind, and I feel like it's 100 years ago, and things were a lot slower and clunkier, and it kind of rings through everything. I mean, I think part of it's by design, part of it may just not be by design. It's just kind of unfortunate. I think the UX is pretty bad. I think the whole interface and stuff is very static and very sort of clunky and difficult to maneuver. I don't like the fast L1 stuff. A lot of things just take a lot of time. Like just these long, slow moments between things. There's no cell phones ringing. There's no constant distractions. There's like these long moments of just like nothing, traveling in the wilderness, and even just interfacing with things takes a long button push. And a lot of things just have this kind of really drawn out sort of manual feeling to them, which I think is amazing. And it's the UX is starting to kind of resonate with me a bit more. I mean, it's been like 20 hours now, so I'm kind of finally getting used to this stuff. I think for a shooting game, again, to the Hauser's credit, like this is what they wanted to do, and I've just never liked their shooting mechanics. I think any first-person shooter by any major studio does a much better job of just mechanics, of just the fundamentals, handling, the fundamentals of just like gunplay and just like moving your cursor on the screen. I don't like snapping to shoot, but if you go to free aim, it's just like unusable. Like I've played a million first-person shooter games that have way better controls than this. I know the FPS controls on PS4 are capable of amazing things, and this game just does not exercise this stuff. But none of their games do it. It's obviously just not a priority for them. To their credit, they can go look at the gazillion sales we made. So who cares? Like people don't.
I think
they do. I think
there's a couple of bits in that. Yeah, I think you're right on the 3 Cs, or the controls and the camera sort of stuff is one topic. I think there's another bit about the pacing, which is that it's incredibly deliberate and very slow. And I actually think that's great. I think don't rush me. It's not that it fits the tone of the world. It's sort of perfect for me in that context. And then I think it's the other one is sort of about their priorities, because obviously it's not a lack of money and a lack of time that means it's awkward to aim. It's that they don't care. That they're fine with the other bit. So, the bit that the immersion of their world is what's key to them.
But that all being said, the rest of the game is stunning. Like it took me a while to even process what's going on. Like it's so insanely polished and done, and it feels like a true next generation thing. Like I'm sitting there just riding for hours in the woods, I'm completely entertained, like amazed, blown away. Completely role playing this place and this moment, and acting like I'm not a sociopath murderer. Sir, I'm trying to play the game like as respectfully as I can. I'll shoot back in self-defense, and if you want to cause problems, like I'll fight back. But I'm not like running around like an animal. I'm trying to be kind of a rational, reasonable human. And the world makes it hard for you sometimes. Like you're getting jumped by a lot of people. It's desperate times. There's a lot of desperate people out there. But I mean, I've just spent hours and hours and hours just running around, just going like, oh my god, this is so. It looks like an Albert Bierstadt painting. Like I come over a ridge and I just stop, and the music's kind of slowly twinging by, and I'm like watching the geese flying north, and I'm just like, this is insanity. This is insanity.
It's really odd because I definitely have that next gen feeling a number of times, but then I have a very distinct previous gen feeling with a lot of the gameplay. Like the clunkiness we were talking about, like that's the weird thing because the clunkiness I actually kind of like. I like the clunkiness and like the spending of time for everything I do. Like looting a body takes like, for my feeling compared to a lot of modern games, it takes like 5.5 minutes. Like going through a building, I'm like, well, I guess this is my next 20 minutes. Let's go look at this, right? Like let's go. Like anything I do is like a time commitment, whether it's traveling to a place or taking on a quest or helping a person or deciding that I want to do something random. It's always a time commitment, and I actually really like that. Like in a weird way, Red Dead is not a game about being a cowboy. It's a game about spending time. And I actually really like that.
Well, I think you're right. I think sorry, go on.
I think there's a lot about the game that feels previous gen that was mentioned before. Like the UX is not it gets in the way of that experience. It feels like a UX that wants to do everything right now. It wants to tell you what is up right now all the time. And I just don't want that. I want to like chill out. And I love that they have the cinematic mode, which is a great idea, but my horse just keeps running into trees, so I don't use it.
I ran into a thing and got shot up, and I was just like, they were totally not on screen, and I was just like, literally hit this caravan, and like the guy just freaked out and just shot me dead. I was just like, okay.
There was a really good video of something that happened to me where I was trying to shoot a guy on a ridge, and then I wanted to press circle for a reason, and I just straight up punched the guy next to me, and then when I shot again, the punch had rotated my character to aim at him. So when I shot again, I just straight up close up executed him. No way, he was helping. No, okay, well. Fair enough. So it's weird how that it has all the beauty and the grandeur and the like wow factor of a next gen, and at the same time it's just so broken.
I think it sticks with it. It's like this. I translate part of that as a love of physicality in the world. You know, you have to go to bed to sleep. You know, you have to go to the point to kick off the mission. I actually have to pick up the body to loot it. All these sorts of things. I think it's a commitment to the concrete nature of the world that I like. Well, that's what I like about it. And yes, it takes time because to make it go fast would to make it feel paper thin and inconsequential and light. So I like that. But then when we cross to aiming, that's the bit that blows my mind. You know, like those bits, like spending the time, or all those bits, or forcing me to, you know, to camp. All these, I actually like these parts because they're saying this is the world you're in, makes it feel like a real place. But every time you tell that story, you laugh, which is fine. There's an element of satire to, you know, all of Rockstar's work. But then you accidentally shoot someone in the head, then that is categorically a failure of the UX. You know, like you didn't make a plan to say what's going to happen when I shoot him in the head. You're like, oh shit, I shot someone in the head. You know, another one of like, you know, anyway, there's a million where the buttons sort of switch meanings, you know, and so
that's the
you're like
worst.
trying to chat.
Crazy.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you instead killed them. I like ran through a door too fast and tackled someone, and then everyone started shooting me. All these things where you're like, it's funny, but it's not what I intended.
Right.
Is it
just like y'all said, like the weapons just don't feel like I'm a firm believer that you should only create a first person shooter by its shotgun. Like that's the full thing. If the shotgun is good, you made a good FPS. And it's just there's no gun in Red Dead Redemption that makes me go like, I shot a gun.
Have you tried the slugs in the shotgun?
Yes.
So to me, the sawed-off hand shotgun with the slugs in it just is like the most environmentally destructive thing, and it knocks dudes right off the horses in one hit. It's really satisfying. I don't ever use shotgun shells. I'll just stock up on shotgun slugs every time. It's amazing.
They're nice, but it also reminds me that every other gun in the game is just kind of miserable.
Kind of boring,
it's and it's weird because like I kind of get it, because again it's like the commitment to the world, right? Like a lot of guns don't do that much damage, and aiming a gun is kind of hard. But then to play to the fantasy, you're supposed to play this cool gunslinging like hero, anti-hero character that's supposed to be good with guns. And I don't know, but my Arthur is terrible with guns. He's awful. I'm like I'm on a horse and there's a wolf running straight ahead, and I had to play that. Remember that sequence at the beginning of the game where you have to shoot like 4 wolves or something? I had to replay that like 6 times in a row because I'm still trying to get used to the horse controls, and they are a little slow. Like everything, there's momentum and physicality to it. So the horse just doesn't give it doesn't care about what I want to do. And at the same time, I'm trying to aim.
I will say that the horse, I'm impressed with the horse. I'm not a huge horse fan in a lot of games. I thought the Shadow of the Colossus did a really good job, but this one is definitely the best horse I've ever played. I think, you know, it was a little clunky at first, but some of the stuff, as I'm putting, you know, more and more hours into it, the relationship I've got with my horse now is the best I've ever had in any game, I think, pretty easily. And understanding, like, he is this entity. He does have kind of his own, you know, thing going on. But as you sort of build that relationship, sort of understand his stuff and can communicate with him sort of in time, you have to be a little, you know, proactive about pulling and turning and stuff like that. But I do really enjoy riding my horse in this game. And I think it's the first time in a game like this I've ever been, like, really connected to it and being like, okay, cool, this is great. I play the game mostly in first person. I don't really like third person.
You play in first person?
Whoa.
That's crazy town.
It's amazing. I mean, it really, to me, third person is always so zoomed out. Like, I don't feel like I'm part of the world. Everything's kind of remote and tiny. And this game in particular, like, you got to change the FOV from the get-go. It's way too tight at first. But if you open it up a bit and then turn off the head bob, because the head bob is insane, walking around the town at that point becomes way more immersive.
You want to be like an Unreal Tournament bot inside Red Dead Redemption.
Yes. Seriously, though, when you're walking around, like, the level of detail that you see in everything around you and the expressions you see on the faces, I mean, everything becomes way more real, and you can spend way more time just walking around a casino, or a saloon, looking at people, talking to people. You feel like you're in that world. They do a really good job, and so that has been amazing. But on third person, on the horse automatically, because the first person on the horse just doesn't work. So I haven't zoom out every time. But yeah, I mean, the first person thing has actually saved this game for me, because third person games really don't work for me nearly as well as first person. And this thing in first person it's pretty stunning. I got to say, it really changes the pace of things. He also walks really slow in third person. And in third person, I also turned off the kind of tap to run, and I just have kind of as a toggle. So it feels way more FPS-y than I think maybe they were originally going for. But it does make the game feel a lot more responsive, and the visuals are just like magnified. Like it looks way better in first person than it does in third person at all.
You think? I have the opposite. Like every time I go into first person, I'm just like, oh, it was definitely
FOV a bit.
Okay, maybe that's it. I should try that.
The head bob is insane. The head bob.
Yeah, the head bob is off the. Yeah, it's like you're on a horse all the time. Anyway. Also, what happened? Like, it was Nintendo. Like the previous horse I liked was Zelda.
Yeah, Breath of the Wild.
But yeah, Breath of the Wild. But the thing I loved most about Breath of the Wild was I think it was, and they didn't get it 100% right, but just to quote that, like, real horses don't run into trees. And like, my horse has run into every possible thing. It has run into trains. It has run into trees. It has no sense of self-preservation. It's remarkable how much they stuck to the bit of, like, this is a real world, but also your horse is 100% has some issues and probably like.
Well, I think there's a commitment to the art and the realization of what I mean. They do things that you don't see in other games, such as when they build a house. The chairs, the arrangement of the chairs and the furniture is really not built for ease of navigation. You know what I mean? There are chairs that won't move, that are in corners, that get you into sort of locked spots. And I think with the world too, they made a forest that looks exactly the way you would believe a forest looks. And so my bet on the horse is that you ended up in a situation where you can barrel through these forests, and it's really difficult, and then you can't have the horse stop dead. You know what I mean? So they're like, well, I guess we're committed to launching you off that horse at this point. But there's an amazing one where you can get hit in the chest by a cross branch, and the horse keeps going, and that one feels exactly the way I imagine it would. I think that's terrific.
Actually, one of my favorite Red Dead moments so far was the sound effect when your horse hits a tree. Like that, whoever did that Foley,
good job.
That is a good sound effect. It's like crunchy and kind of like squishy, and you're just like, huh. I hope they didn't actually record a horse running into something, because I will believe it.
There's a lot of baseball bats in hanging chunks of meat, I reckon, in that game.
Have you guys noticed that when you're riding the horse, the auto map, if you set your waypoint, it is terrible. It's like as bad as Google Maps. It sends you like halfway across the map back just to get back onto the road, and then your target's like right over here. So I'm always looking at the map, going, no, I actually just need to go that way. But they don't. I think the waypoint system only works for roads. So a lot of times you got to just completely disregard it, and because going over the country, unless there's a cliff, I mean, it's the same as going over a road almost. I mean, maybe a little slower, but it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I'm confused too about the level of. Sometimes if you just hold the button and you're on a path, you're on a waypoint, or whatever. A lot of times the horse will just like stick to it and do it, and everything's fine. And then sometimes he just doesn't. Sometimes he just veers off and heads into the river or whatever.
It's a simulated horse. It's got a mind of its own.
It's thirsty, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. There's no thirst meter I can see.
Hey, Alex, I'm curious, since you worked on Assassin's Creed 3 and Far Cry 4, somewhat similar-ish games, when you play a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, are you seeing all the magic behind the curtains? Do you understand what's going on? Like, what has stumped you? What do you see in this game that you say, how the hell is this possible?
Well, I'm sure it's the same. The genre doesn't change much. I'm sure everyone on the call can sort of see, where they're working within the boundaries of the technology and when they're working within the boundaries of the idea. It is funny though, having, worked on Assassin's 3, where we were in a very similar, time period in a very similar place. And so early on we had missions where I was like, I remember working on our version of that, someone being, lost flowing down a stream, someone hanging from a cliff, a wagon. So lots of these moments were sort of familiar. So you can do a one-to-one on like what did they prioritize or what did they choose to do differently. And I think that Assassin's 3 is probably the closest to a Rockstar of the Assassin's version. Probably the early up until 3, we were leaning on the sort of more immersive world and let you do unusual things style of open world. And since then it's been more RPG Witcher style. The teams that have taken over that. But yeah, just like the commitment to detail is the thing that blows my mind. And also stuff we could never do quite well enough, which is the transition between exteriors and interiors, which I think is magnificent. Just how they get that lighting to work when you're outside and it's night and you see the light inside. That is some voodoo shit as far as I'm concerned, because we always had to do lighting switches and like a weird tight animation going through a door, like all kinds of tricks, and they seem to somehow do it. And their sunsets and skyboxes are just phenomenal. Every time I look at it, I find it's gorgeous.
Do you notice though? I totally agree on every point, but do you notice that I see a snap between lights, like when the sunset's going down, or like there's a couple of different lighting sets that it kind of does a visual, like it goes down, like visually. I'm like, whoa, that was weird.
Yeah, there's a few artifacts I see as well, but if I just stop on a cliff and look at that sunset, I could look at their sky for hours.
The light model in general is incredible. Just everything light related, like I don't know how much they're doing, but like the physicality of the light and like it's just
that's a good word.
Mind blowing.
The fog and the steam and this stuff comes and goes, and you're just like, it doesn't look like game fog. I don't know what they're doing, but it's just some other sort of volumetric lighting simulation. I don't know what's going on. I love it.
Is it just budget? I mean, how do you account for this? Budget and time?
It's just people and time, which equates to budget. You can sit on it longer and longer, and they have that. They can. I mean, someone was joking. I think my friend Jonathan Cooper was joking online the other day. There was 4,000 people in the credits. So if you do 4,000, even assuming a ramp across 7 years, that's a lot of man hours. You know what I mean? Like, so you look into that, and that blows my mind a little bit. Also, I said it to the team here at Typhoon, and the whole room as one said, I will never work on a game for 7 years in my life. So I think that's fascinating. There's half the studio did Assassins, the other half did Far Cry and Batman games, and they were like, these days, that idea just fills them with terror. Maybe it's just that we're all bald and grey now, but the idea of being on something for 7 years, even if it's the best thing ever, just is kind of crazy.
Yeah, how do you... go ahead.
It's resources, but and obviously there's the whole less pretty side of that whole story. Like a game like that, even with 7 years, is not easily made without people working more than they should. So there's a lot of what impresses me about the game. I think would still exist without some of that crunch, but I don't think. It's weird because a lot of what impressed me about the game could have been done without crunch. I think the level of detail that they have on everything probably couldn't. And I have very mixed feelings about that personally, because it ups the bar for our industry in such a 7 years of work of people who are, half crunched, 7 years of people that have worked with an infinite budget. Like it sets expectations that are not necessarily fair or good for the rest of the industry at the moment. So, as a small time indie, it doesn't directly affect me, but there's thoughts I have about that.
But I think that's true. It depends on. I mean, it depends on what weight class you're fighting in, I think, a little bit. So it's and for me, Rockstar, some of those games have pushed themselves out of competition with other people. Like even at Ubi, we were sort of aware we were competing with the Activisions and the EAs of this world, and in sort of that mainstream, the Konamis on their big projects, like for those AAA titles. But even then, you're like not really going to do 7 years, so you're not even in that. And then under that, like as well, now being indie as well, that you can't even look at it. You know what I mean? Like you couldn't even possibly make a game, as a cowboy at the moment. You would be admitting pre-defeat.
I think the flip side of that though is that this is obviously a high watermark. Like it's such an instant masterpiece that I was like, all right, this is one of those games that'll go down in history as like, providing that new watermark for the next knows how long, you know. And this coming this late in the generation and seeing how beautiful it is, like, you know, that this is what they always do. They're going to have this ready on the next generation stuff. And I can't even fathom how prettier it could be. Like, I don't really understand where you go from here besides maybe running all that at 60. Like,
Well, just a side topic on that, though, fascinating, though, is I think that it's that the search for realism is about to evaporate because there's new tech coming in for scanning and grabbing things from the office that if it's art direction that'll win the next generation, even more so than it already does, you know. So I think you'll be able to make a table and a chair in like 7 seconds and anyone could do it. So I think that level, if they're just trying to simulate it, that bit won't matter, like the man hours of the building of the world. But the story direction and the you know, the voice direction and the sort of like flow of the game is the thing that's super hard to emulate.
That's the thing about this game too. I mean, I'm an art director, so I look at a lot at this stuff, and I think even though it is this kind of photorealistic look, they're basically more or less going after. There is an element of stylization that is highly consistent throughout the whole thing. I mean, really, I just keep thinking like how clear this vision was. I mean, they were obviously looking at a lot of these old Western paintings, and they're saying, okay, you know, the light, the colors, the depth, the atmosphere. Like, how are we going to take all this stuff? We're going to nail it. We're going to hold it super consistent, and we're going to execute on this. And they did a phenomenal job, in my opinion. And I really am just
it's gorgeous.
I think it's some of the best art direction of the year, like, for sure.
Yeah, I also have that feeling. Like, it's a weird balance between pure like realism and also like kind of like a I don't know, like a painting, like Western paintings, like book covers, like stuff like that, where they're sitting somewhere between the two realms, but they haven't. But it's not abstracted. It's
It's genius. It's like it's
romantic.
the thing that it's romantic.
Romantic realism. Yes.
The rockstar genius has always been to give you the fantasy of Los Angeles, the fantasy of being a crime boss, the fantasy of being a cowboy. So you do all the things that you've seen in a movie. Someone gets punched out of a bar through a window. You know, someone flops over the edge. And, exactly. You steal a wagon and a train, all this stuff. And so you're hitting all the big fantasy points, which is brilliant. You know, like I've always seen open world games myself as vacations. Like I'm building a vacation playground for someone. So it's as real as it could be, but really it's a holiday in the American Revolution, and then it's a holiday in Nepal, but things go horribly wrong. You need your twist, on these things, but you build that fantasy for people who probably will never be able to get there or be able to go there. So their point of reference isn't reality. Their point of reference is this sort of, there's a TV reference or a painting reference or a book, a novelization reference. And I think they're the best in the world by far at that.
Right. One of the things I like about what they're leaning into is the grit of that time period. Obviously, never having lived there, but I think logic that tells us where technology was at that time is that it was a really hard time to live in. But there was decades of entertainment when it comes to westerns where they really fantasized it, and I think made it made it maybe a little more appealing than it probably was. But one of the things I like about this game is just walking through the towns and seeing the way that people are dressed and seeing the stain marks on them. Like you do get to feel a little more about this was a really hard time and place to live in. And I think a lot of westerns really lose on that. Like it's more of like the Sunset Riders, vision of the westerns, which I'm not as interested in, obviously.
Yeah, the world is an incredible character. Like more than anything, like the world is the main character in that game, and I'm sure there's somebody who wrote this think piece already, but that is you can see through the seams if you're really paying attention, but if you're just playing and letting it come at you, like this world feels as real as anything I've ever played in a video game. Like just getting into a town and seeing somebody jump on a train as it's driving, like just like this little scripted moment. I went back, reloaded, and checked if it was scripted. It was scripted, but like I would have 100% believed it, right? And that's the smoke and mirrors of our work. Is it doesn't matter whether it's scripted or dynamic as long as I believe it.
Yep.
I believe it. I believe that world.
That's where the scale of this thing just kind of comes together. Where I screwed up. There was a mission that you guys probably know what I'm talking about. But the first time I went into Blackwater, you're not supposed to go down that way yet, or I didn't think you were supposed to. The way that it was set up, the way it was presented to me, I didn't think I was supposed to go down that way yet. So I went looking for other missions, and there was no other missions on the map. So I just did this huge run all the way down south, and the whole time was just phenomenal, just watching the countryside slowly change. I got on these little mishaps and adventures, and to me that's what the open world thing is all about. So I don't want to do this scripted thing right now. I want to go off and just explore and have fun and have these adventures just kind of thrown at me, and they're very emergent. A lot of them are they're kind of scripted little setups that are sort of procedurally placed around. In fact, one time I screwed up a save game thing. I don't know what happened, but I went back probably an hour or so, and in a totally different part of the map, I experienced a lot of the same people on the side of the road and a lot of this little circumstances that were obviously kind of scripted for about that time in my playthrough, but they're obviously happening in random places. But still, that just allows for all this role playing and all this like, do I want to get involved with this? Do I want to go rob these people? Do I think I could steal something from them? Like, do I want to not get involved? Like, do I want to go after that bear I just saw? Like, I had all these crazy adventures. I got all my snow clothes and went up into the mountains and just went exploring and, was tracking deer and got in a fight with a bear, and then some wolves came out. And like, it just like this long adventure that's completely my own, experience.
Well, but I think that's where the game shines, and that's what I love. Like my worst experience with it was the opening 2 hours. You know what I mean? Where I was like, I just want to ride off into the sunset and shoot a bear and like fall off my horse and get drunk in a bar. And instead, I was going through this very measured, tutorial heavy, which seemed mostly about syncing my movement speed on a horse, on foot, in a wagon, in a crowd, like everything with the people around me. And I was like, this is not what I want to do. You know what I mean? I don't necessarily want to engage with this. Whereas I think the town, that you have, or the little, I shouldn't say town, your camp that you have is magical because you can engage as much as you want. You can come back and chat to them if you want. You can ignore them if you want. And so it does give you that role-playing feeling that you were talking about, Jake, where you just like, you can choose to interact or not interact, and you still feel free and as though you're the agent of change as opposed to just like a passenger.
Yeah. It's mind-blowing. I wish I could play it right now.
I actually really like the opening moments. Like they're actually some of my favorite parts of the game so far, which is weird because I'm normally like open worlds, just let me do whatever. But I really liked the complete sense of dread throughout the entire sequence. Like I don't expect to open a game on like, wow, we are like Uncharted has done it. Like there's games that have done it, like the slow, absolutely everything is screwed. But I think it's a good defining moment for the gang and the camp is to start at their lowest point and kind of like try and build from there. The camp is weird to me though, because I love the camp in that sequence, and I've kind of fallen out of love with it as the game goes. Like it feels more and more like a quest giver. Even though I interact, like Dutch doesn't feel like the lead of the camp. Like I'm the lead of the camp. Yeah. Dutch is just there. Like I'm the boss. Like I'm sure Dutch is like this charismatic like lead, but like what's Dutch doing? He's hanging out in the camp. I'm going out and like, being like, hey Dutch, you want to hear what I've been up to? Because it's great. Let me tell you how your story progresses. And I understand the tension that they have there. Obviously, like it's not that's not something you can easily fix. But yeah, I started really in love with this gang, and not for reasons of story, but for reasons of mechanics. I've kind of like slowly drifted away from loving it as much.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. I haven't moved camps yet. I think you do, but I was really impressed with the opening.
I don't want to know.
Like I said, I haven't like you're the most clunky at the beginning. Like you don't know what's going on with the controls, and they're kind of walking you through stuff. But I thought it was a really bold move to move into like the snowstorm at night. I mean, it's one of the most graphically, like visually over the top, just insanely beautiful things you've ever seen in a game, and they throw you right into it. Normally you kind of like work your way up to some sort of dramatic moment like that, and they just throw you right in the shit. And the lights and the snow coming down. I was just like, "What is this, a game or a movie? Like, what is happening here?" And I agree. I was like, "Hurry up, take the leash off so I can go, play."
Sure.
But I was willing to let it
go with it
this time and to really sort of introduce the characters and kind of set up the dynamic of like who these people are. Like it's an unusual group, right? Usually it's a gritty group of bandits and or whatever. And this is kind of like it's a whole bunch of people. There's like women and children and like we're bad guys, but we're not. And people are taking care of each other. And I thought it was really interesting, just kind of as a setup of like what is the situation? And like there's this big mystery. Like I haven't played through the game enough to know what actually went down there yet. I'm assuming I'm going to find out. But I mean,
what happened on the boat? What happened? That's what in that start, everyone. What happened on the boat? I'm like, I don't know. I wasn't on the boat. It's reminding me that I'm not the character over and over and over again. I wasn't on the boat, dude.
I'm on a mountain in the snow. I don't know about a boat.
What about that boat? I thought we were starving to death. The boat.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about how many actors that they've hired and all the motion capture and all that stuff that they did. But it's a very talky game unless you're by yourself right on your horse. But I'm surprised about how much dialogue they had. But it goes back to like I think one of the things we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, which is about the fact that this is a very auteur a driven game, and just how bold it is. They know that they have pre-orders of millions of copies, right? That they're going to sell tens of millions of units, and they're going to get a lot of their GTA fan base to probably check this thing out just by sheer fact of the fact that it's Rockstar. And I'm just sitting there playing that opening, Jake, right, and thinking, wow, I'm just like, so it's a weird way to look at it, but I'm just so happy that tens of millions of kids that buy GTA and play Rockstar games because they can just like run around and shoot and just do whatever they want to do are kind of being forced through this pretty interesting and dark and deep, epic, like more or less on rails experience. And then also just reading like comments online about, just how we talked about the animation, how unresponsive it is. It's almost like overly detailed, right? But I love that about it, and I just kind of like love to I'm like drinking the tears of all these like kids online going like, I just want to hit the button to like pick up stuff. I don't like, let me skip the animations. Like,
I think we're in agreement on that. No, I think my favorite, on Assassin's 3, my favorite bit that we did was there's 2 hours in the middle of the game in a blockbuster that's in an appropriate, period appropriate Native American language, and just forcing 30 million 15-year-olds to read subtitles. It still makes me jolly. Like, every time I think about it, I'm like, listen to it. This
is good. You only have to do it for 2 hours. Then you get your gun. Then you get
you gotta go. Yeah.
Whatever you want.
Slow start. Screw you. 6 hours. Listen to it.
Sit down. Right.
Ryan, what do you think about the performances specifically, Ryan? What stands out just in the way they're recorded and the performances themselves?
I think for the most part, quite natural. I've got this thing where I was playing last night and I noticed that they were doing it, which irritates me about Rockstar games. That they and now I'm going to tell you guys, and it's going to ruin the game for everybody. Is that go back to like Vice City? Like they talk with their hands. It's like you're going to go over here. Okay, cool, man. I'll see you later, man. Like they just like they really fully utilize the magic of motion capture. And I think for a game where like in the opening in particular, it's very subtle, right? And I think in a very good way. And so I think for the most part, it's done really, really well. When they get into the over exaggeration, it's where I start to like lose a little bit of interest. But I mean, the performances are really great. I mean, and I would just love to know the story about the actor who played, is it Arthur Morgan?
Arthur,
yeah. And just how many sessions, like how many days, years has he been this character, right? And with like I was also thinking about like the scale of the game, and I'm also recently played Spider-Man, and just like, man, the scale of games is getting so so massive, and the amount of time that they probably spent with the actor Yudi to play Spider-Man, like over the course of that development, they really get to know these characters because of the scale of the game. They're just living that character all the time, like a good TV show, right? Where I don't think games oftentimes afford that. Like on Metal Gear, we've maybe spent 5-10 days, with our main actors, because the game is long, but not that long, right? And they have to live it for only about 10 days, right?
Yeah. Arthur, how do y'all feel about Arthur? Like for as far as, because I'm in that weird stage where Arthur is kind of my character, but also really isn't my character. Like for me, A Quiet Time is a terrible mission because I don't drink. So like going into that and being like Arthur. I've been told it made me very confused about why people drink, but like that's because all of that seemed awful to me.
But isn't that part of the I'm sure that there's a huge chunk of the audience breaking that rating on the cover, and they're not allowed to drink either. It's part of the fantasy of it's something cowboys did, and now you're living the moment. I don't shoot people either, but it's like
Yeah, so that's the weird thing because Arthur is me, but also not me. They're walking this very fine line between Arthur is your character with your morality, with your sense of like affecting this world, but also Arthur is just Arthur, and I'm like he's kind of a grumpy old ass.
But how's that different than any game like this? I mean, you always have to sort of assume.
Well, no. I think to Rami's point, I think it's really good because the best GTA is GTA 3. Where he doesn't talk, he's just an avatar that I inhabit. So I am in GTA 3. I didn't want to be Nico Bellic. He was a jerk. He was the same thing. You know what I mean? I didn't like him. 5, I sort of made peace because I could jump around, so I was the weird puppet master, between the characters. But I agree. I'd prefer to be, a guy in this who just never spoke, and Dutch would therefore have a chance to be the leader because he had to give all the speeches, and all these other people would talk and could be their characters. and I'm just the agent of change that moves to it. It's the version that I would like.
Yeah, I'm just a little confused by it because the amount of times they give you the sense of affecting the character is huge. Like they really try to make you feel like you decide how you deal with things and you decide how you respond to people. But like in the end, like I'm not quite sure if it's just a part of the game I'm in, but he feels very railroaded.
Well, but you're also in the uncanny valley.
Like,
you're in the uncanny valley of interaction where you don't choose. You just choose how you do it in Rockstar games. You choose. You know what I mean? You're going to choose. Do you strangle him or do you kill him? Or do you like shoot him or do you do you slap him around or just yell at him? Because they're telling a story. Like it's a story-based game. There's a few moments where they make it a bit blurrier, but like they're going to make you do what he did. You know.
I think that's the part that I had to kind of come to grips with. There was a mission where there's a couple different ways to go about it, but I ended up needing to shoot up the whole town. Like I basically walked into town.
Just had to happen.
No way out. Man. You leave the town. It was just...
You didn't have a horse.
It was one of the missions. Did you guys play the Mika mission? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
You kind of have to shoot up the town. And so I did that, and I was like, you know what? That's not me, bro. Like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go back in. I'm going to find a way through this mission that doesn't require me to shoot up all these people. That I literally walk around in first person for half an hour saying hello to everybody. And now I'm this guy. So I went back and did it again, and I realized the second time, going at a totally different path, this is just part of the mission. This is how it goes down. And so I had to just be like, all right, now that I know this is up, like this moment happened to Arthur, who is not me. And I'm sort of, representing him. I'm his agent in a way, but like this is part of his story, and I have to just go along with the stuff. Even though this part is more of the, the story stuff is more driven, and I have to just kind of go along on the rails for this part, and it doesn't really represent me kind of having the choice that I do in the open world part of the stuff. And so there is some dichotomy there, but I think I finally kind of accepted it and got my piece with it. And just sometimes when he does bad things, I'm like, well, I am kind of a bad guy, and it's a bad time, and.
Maybe it's like an uncanny valley of seamlessness, like because they so seamlessly meander between this is you and this is where you control the character and this is just what happens to Arthur, that it's hard
it's so
to
beautiful.
catch.
A lot of times you can't tell when the game has started again.
Yeah,
you like stand there for a minute, you're like, oh, I guess I'm back up. Okay,
It's kind of how you can make people feel like, how you can make players feel like they made a choice when you actually took it for them. Like I think Red Dead is incredibly good at that. But when it breaks really hard. Like I think this is the problem with a game of that skill and that level of like graphical detail is the first time my carriage launched into the sky because the horse clipped into the ground. It's like, and it was beautiful, by the way. I loved it. It was like the most beautiful God rays around my carriage. But like the game when it breaks, it does this. It has this. Maybe it's the Rockstar brand, but it's okay. It's like this beautiful, consistent, realistic world, and also my character is under a 90-degree angle, spinning circles for no reason, just floating in the sky half a meter above the ground, and I'm just laughing, and it's good. It's fine.
I haven't seen anywhere near the stuff that like you would see in a Bethesda game. I mean, it's very It's been a couple little weird things. There's one time I saw guys, the horses drew in a moment after they kind of appeared. I was like, okay, this is a physical, this is a game limited by technology. Because most of the time, those scenes are pretty hidden. It's
I think it's probably the most polished Rockstar game I feel like I've ever played. And I would love to know when they basically decided to lock it down. Because I remember hearing about them going through cert for like GTA 5, 6, 9 months before the game was actually finished. Just that's how massive these games are and how long it takes to go through that process and lock down that game. And I feel like they probably could have shipped this game in September or August or even maybe earlier, but I'm glad that they put the time in, and I think it really speaks to like what they're trying to achieve with like the auteurness of it. It's having quite a polished experience. Now I'm sure if I can go online, I'm sure there's a bunch of edge casey stuff like Rami was saying. Like if you want to poke at the world, you can see behind the curtain a little bit. But I'm playing mostly main path. I'm not trying to break it, and if I stay within that realm, I'm seeing a lot of polish, which I typically don't see.
No, it's incredibly.
I can't help it.
You're gonna break it.
It's just the thing I do, especially with worlds like this. But most of the things I found, I kind of found by accident. I've had a train explode while I drove by because I guess something ran into it, and I didn't see anything, but it was kind of like just like the back part fell apart, and I was like, oh,
sounds good.
reasonable. But there's something weird about it. Like there's something so alluring about the level of fidelity in this world that after that happens, your brain is very good at just switching back to like, oh, this is a beautiful forest.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, my weird one is because again everything is so ponderous. When you're riding your horse quickly, if you ride past birds, you just run over the birds. You know what I mean? Like they sort of fly up and bounce off you like some sort of rubber duck. You know what I mean? And again, I was like, oh, free hunting. You know, like, it was good. but I think that, you know, to your point before about the uncanny valley stuff of interaction is that, you know, people have talked about this for years, but the rate of evolution and the quality increase in graphics and animation and sort of, you know, and sound has radically outpaced the improvement in the actual interaction itself. You know, like it's much faster if you decide, hey, I want to be nice like you did. It's really hard. Like before I did open world stuff, I worked on Sims games and sport and all these things, and trying to come up with an equal opportunity path for positivity is a nightmare. Like there's a podcast in that if we want to get into that. Like, you know, because the social cost of being obnoxious is usually embarrassment, and that is hard to animate. You know what I mean? Like death by embarrassment is not the same thing. And I feel that every time in the camp, like you chat to them for a while, and it holds together much longer than other games have. And I'm like, wow, they really seem to know what I just did. You know, I can have an opinion about it, but you push 2 levels and then it collapses again. You're like, have a good day, and you're like, oh, they're all puppets, you know.
So in first person, you tend to get right up on people to talk to them, where they're like at a, you know, like a reasonable kind of distance for talking, and everyone's like, do you mind? You're like, why are you talking? I didn't realize I was in your grill. I'm sorry. Everybody gets angry at me, like, do you mind? What are you staring at? I'm like, okay, all right, sorry.
Jake, I think I know what you're thinking when you're playing the first person mode, which is what I'm thinking. Is that, man, I really hope this thing is in VR next year on PC.
Why would you want to vomit while playing a video game? I don't understand.
I don't get VR sickness anymore. And imagine that game with completely cinematic first person and real gun controls where you could just point and shoot. Oh my God.
I mean, there was
so
hints in the code somewhere, right, for like the companion app that they were hinting at Oculus or something.
There was a line of code in there about an Oculus Rift or something like that for some compatibility, which is like giving me a lot of hope that next year when they, you know, eventually ship on PC, which, you know, they're going to, you know, and then somebody's going to hack it in anyway, and it's probably going to be, that's where you're going to start throwing up, Alex, is because it's
I'm just imagining it. I'm feeling nauseous.
Just to wrap things up, do you guys have any final thoughts that you'd just die if you didn't get off your chest about this game?
Only one for me is we're all going to get hate mail because we had issues with the game of the year. So understand that we've all been very positive. So don't threaten my mother or my family or my workplace, please.
It's a weird thing. We talk about a lot on this podcast of we're all super impressed by it, but I think there's a weird split in the Game Informer office, at least, of you have to check yourself of, am I having fun though? Am I having fun minute to minute?
I'm not. It's the least
I'm not having
fun.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's not a fun game. Yeah.
What a good note to end on.
But that's kind of why it's great. I think Ryan kind of nails it. Like it's not fun. This game isn't fun. There's nothing fun. Like it's a chore. It's like a long.
But fun is but fun is a terrible word. Why do we use that word? It's enjoyable. I'm immersed. I'm loving. I'm having a great time. But it's not fun. I agree. It's not.
I'm not even sure I enjoy it. Like
no way out.
I'm just like continuously. I'm like, oh God, okay, well, let's sit on my horse for the next 25 minutes, getting to this other thing, and then I just get randomly shot by some guy that I robbed 25 hours ago, and I'm like, well come on, like at this point, like, can I just pay you back or something? But that's like, in a way, that is why I haven't quit. Like I bounce off of Red Dead continuously. Like I play it for 2 hours, and I go, this is bullshit. I shut it down. I boot up Destiny. I have some fun with a good shotgun and a fusion rifle, punch some stuff, and then the next day I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll give it another go. And then I'm like 5 hours later, and then I go, screw this. I hate it. I'm not enjoying myself. And then the next day I'm just back. So
I can't quit you, man.
A lot of big budget games like this. This is not one of them.
Yeah, I didn't bounce off this one. I bounced off Destiny though, so we should do the Red Dead versus Destiny. I'm like, I'm a human loot box. I'm just a random number generator getting pointless increments of things and slowly dying.
Such a good gun. Such good guns.
Great guns.
I feel my life escaping when I play Destiny.
Very good gun.
I was when I first started playing, I was freaking out, like the production quality and stuff, and I was just like, oh my God, like the first 20 minutes in, you're just like, what is happening? And I played for a couple hours, and I was just like, wow, like this. I mean, like I hated the interface right away, but like I was like, I'm gonna get over it. I'll suck it up. And I kept playing, and I was just like, wow, this is like really, like, I think I tweeted, like, this is one of the best games I've ever played. And my buddy John Riccardi up in Tokyo was like, oh, better than Breath of the Wild, huh? I see how it is. And I was like, it took me a moment, and I was like, you can't even compare these things. It's like, I'm like, why can't you? Because they're very similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah, on paper.
But they're not even, like, you can't even begin to compare them, because that is a video game. Like, you jump around, and you do stuff, and everything, the controls are perfect, and, like, that's a video game. This is not a video game in that sense. It's this clunky, sort of like weird hybrid between cinema and game that in its own right is this phenomenal thing, but I don't feel like it's gamey and like immediately responsive. And like the reasons that I play video games generally is definitely not really included in this game. But this is like this whole other thing, and I'm like completely content to just sit back and be like, all right, yeah, throw it at me. This is amazing. Like I do think the open world stuff and the choice and the experience of this just massive world that is so big that you can't even believe it is unlike anything I've ever played before. I definitely think it's in a class of its own.
Yeah, for sure. Ryan, anything you want to plug before you take off here, man?
No, this has been super fun. Thanks for inviting us to have this really fun chat. Just like Alex said, like internet, I love this video game. I love you. I love your family. This has been super. This has been
Stay safe, Rami. Stay safe.
Jesus Christ.
And thank you for organizing.
Oh yeah,
thanks guys. I had a great time.
That was just a clip from a larger show called The Game Informer Show. You can find it on iTunes, Google Play, or GameInformer.com. We take the fun opportunities and exclusive information from Game Informer magazine and boil it into a show that airs every Thursday with exclusive cover story information, developer interviews, a lot of fun stuff. So come love games with us.